Welcome to the Settlement Pros Podcast. Here's your host, Jack Meligan.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Settlement Pros Podcast with today's guest, Steve Piucci. My name is Jack Meligan. I've spent over 30 years as an investment advisor, settlement planner, and pre-mediation consultant. And during that time, I've had the privilege to see some of the good, the bad, and the ugly in my own industry, as well as in the lawyers that I've worked with over the years. And the job of this podcast, the reason for this podcast is I feel it's important to try to help individuals who have been injured and other attorneys who are looking for another attorney in another state for a co-counsel type arrangement, help them understand who the pros are and separate them from the cons. And I don't mean cons in the way of, as somebody that's been out of jail. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is we know that certain trial lawyers, are essentially conning the public, and they're doing it through websites that are fantastic, give the impression that a lawyer is a tremendous settler of cases, and that may be true, but what I found is the best attorneys that I've worked with are the trial lawyers that are willing to go into the arena, and the arena is the courtroom. Without the ability and without the track record of having tried cases, everybody listening to this podcast, that's the most important imperative is if you're looking for an attorney to help you with a personal injury matter, you need to have an attorney that's tried cases, loves to try cases, looks forward to trying cases, lives for the courtroom, is not afraid to go in the courtroom. This doesn't mean that they've got a totally 100% record of winning. I don't know of any attorneys that can boast that. But that's why trial lawyers that go into the courtroom are extra dangerous to the defense, because the defense knows that they will be in the courtroom with somebody who is not afraid to lose. Makes them very dangerous. So, as I said before, the credit belongs to those that are actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood. Let's begin. So, Steve.
Don't forget tears, Jack.
Tears, that's right. Welcome to the podcast. So, look, I understand you don't have a tie on, and we didn't talk about this, but at the last second, as I was reading The Art of Practicing Law, the article from the Oregon State Bar, and being reminded of your affinity for art, I decided to rock an original Jerry Garcia just for you today.
Thank you.
So that's the Jerry Garcia.
You are good.
I never became a big fan of the music, but man, I love the guy's ties. So, crazy times we've been in. Everybody good on your side?
We're all good, hanging in.
Good. Yeah, everything's good. So we're recording this podcast on May 27th of 2020, which is, of course, everybody knows is we're coming out of this COVID-19 situation, and all trying to get used to a new normal. So one thing I like to do, Steve, is start off with a confession. Tell me a confession about yourself. My confession is that growing up, I really wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, but when I got into college, I mean, you've heard the adage that some guys, can't hit the curveball. Shoot, I couldn't hit the curveball, and I had trouble with the fastball too. So I had fun playing in college, but I never made it to the pros. What's your confession?
I had a similar problem. I thought I was going to be a Major League Baseball player, but I was about 5'3" until I entered senior year of high school. So that wasn't really ever going to happen.
Did you play a lot of second base?
I did. That was my spot.
Where we always put the short guys.
Oh yeah, but I could field, and I was deceptively slow.
Oh, that's great.
I will confess that I am one of four twin brothers. And that's actually true because I have a fraternal twin and I have two younger identical twin brothers. And could spend an hour or more on that, but that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. So when did you start Piucci Law? What year was that?
Well, it's had, the short answer is about 5 years ago when my son Joe left the public defender's office, Multnomah Defenders in Portland, Oregon. He did that for 3 years, and I finally talked him into joining me. But Piucci Law is the current iteration of me being solo or small firm. I had one partner previously, Keith Dozier, in the around 2000-ish era. But since 1991, I've been practicing on my own or with one other lawyer, and mostly solo till Joe joined.
Yes, and so it's just you and Joe at this point as the lawyers in the firm?
Yep, with two good paralegals that know what they're doing.
Good. Yes, those paralegals are hugely important to the success of any one of these trial lawyer firms. So amongst your clientele, you've got a personal injury practice here in Portland. And another interesting tidbit I should tell the audience is I think you hold the distinction of being the only individual to have served as the president of the Oregon State Bar Association, as well as the Oregon State Trial Lawyers Association. So has anybody else ever done both?
Actually, yes. Rick Hugler. Rick
Who
Hugler did. Rick Hugler.
Oh, Hugler. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were the second, or were you the first?
I was the second because I followed Rick to the presidency of the Oregon State Bar.
Yeah. Well, that says something about both of you that you know the bar would elect you and have trial lawyers be presidents. I remember when I first heard about it, I thought it was pretty unusual, but definitely an acknowledgement of both of you guys' professionalism and the standing you're held in the legal community. So amongst the clientele, what type of cases specifically in personal injury do you seem to cater to or call your specialty?
Sure. Our firm's clear specialty is construction injury law, which in Oregon is the employer liability law, which basically turns a worker whose job is dangerous into an indirect employee of, say, a general contractor. Can't sue your employer because of workers' compensation immunity, but these third-party cases against other entities that have safety responsibilities and don't meet them may be brought. So third-party cases of all kinds of stripes. That could include a car accident with a plumber driving down the road working for his boss and gets hit in a car accident. But most of our cases are, our bigger cases are people who get hurt badly on the job site. We also do the cars and trucks and people falling, premise liability injuries. I have handled a lot of traumatic brain injury cases over the years, and we're seeing more of them. There, of course, due to the NFL, people actually believe in them more than they used to. But
oh wow,
a lot of severe injuries, quads, paraplegics. You know, the kind of people that you help too.
Yeah,
that's why we know each other.
Yeah, that's right. So I want to talk a little bit about who you are and where you came from, what's in your DNA. So where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Oregon or somewhere else?
Oh, I usually answer that question by saying I was not an Army brat, but I was similarly the brat of an educator. My dad was he got his doctorate in education in Florida, where I was born in Gainesville, and then spent a lot of time in the SUNY system of New York State. So I spent the first 10, 11 years up in New York as he moved around, and ultimately he became dean of Rhode Island College, a teaching college in Providence, Rhode Island, where I lived, and finished junior year in high school, and then he got a job in Chicago. So I ended up there for a year and went to Illinois, ultimately to Gonzaga Law School. So I've lived in Spokane, Washington, and then my wife got a job in television in Portland, and that's how we got here in '81. So I bounced around.
Man, so you transferred right before your senior year of high school?
Yes, I did, not voluntarily, but I did it. So did my twin.
How did that work out?
Well, I met my wife because of it, and lots of my dear friends from college, and I ended up just loving Chicago, but became one of the two kinds of Midwesterners there are in the world, and one of them still lives there. So, my opinion, West is best. I even take the East over the Midwest, but love living in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, I've grown up on the West Coast too, which I now refer to as the best coast. So,
correct, sir.
Yep, it is spectacular out here. So tell me, you told us a little bit about your dad, university professor and so forth. And you've mentioned some siblings, twins. How about your mom?
My mom was a teacher as well. She was a kindergarten teacher mostly, and did some elementary school. I said I had 3 twin brothers. I have another non-twin brother. So she raised 5 boys. And we thought we were nice to her, but as an adult, I could see that it was kind of a rough road for a while. We had a basketball court right outside their bedroom window, and she was trying to get her master's degree during the time when all 5 of us played basketball every day, plus the rest of the whole neighborhood, right under her desk. And inevitably the window would open. It's like, you kids, get out of here. So it was love, but also a degree of torture for her, and she survived. Neither of my parents are with us now, but they led long, productive, and fun lives.
Well, man, that sounds like a candidate for the all-world Mother Hall of Fame. 2 sets of twins. Oh my God! So how much time elapsed between you and your brother and the next set? Was the single, we'll call him the single brother, was he in the middle?
Yes. So I was born first, the 6 most important minutes of my life. My brother Mark, 3.5 years later, Matt came along, and then 3 years after that, Andy and Tony were born. So we were all within 6 years, just about.
My word. Wow. Must have been fun.
Yeah, it's kind of a walking pickup game, whatever kind of sport you wanted. You just started with 5. It was pretty.
Start with the Piucci brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So your last name, your surname, unusual. I don't think I've ever seen it before. Piucci, obviously Italian.
CCC. And we wondered if the I might have gotten stuck in there at Ellis Island, but didn't.
Interesting.
My dad found our family in the early 80s, and they all spelled it with an I, and there's plenty of them. And now with Ancestry.com, we know 100 Piuccis in Italy.
Oh, wow.
Plus a bunch in Brazil.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Brazil. So you mentioned playing basketball and baseball. Any other sports growing up? Any other activities?
Yeah, mostly baseball, basketball, soccer. And back in Rhode Island, in New England had soccer way before anybody else. I think maybe St. Louis was in the 60s, was a hotbed of soccer, but we played sports year round. Not that we were great, we weren't bad, but you know, that was what you did.
Yeah.
We played tackle football in the snow and you know, all sorts of kick the kids out the door, come in for lunch, go back outside, come in for dinner, and go back outside. Sports all day long.
Yeah. Yeah, those similar upbringing, and that it's a different time. Those were the times when in the summer you could leave in the morning, and the only rule was be home by the time the street lights come on. And you'd only whip through to grab a peanut butter and jelly sandwich as you went off on the next adventure or to the next game.
Excuse me. My mom always had a bell of some variety that would ring for blocks and blocks. And people would say, they come up to you on their bikes and go, "Your mom's calling you. I heard the bell," you know.
Wow.
You better move quickly.
Time to go.
Yeah, it worked.
So did your brothers end up being lawyers also, or are you the only one in the family?
None of them became lawyers. I have a DNA molecular biologist brother in Oakland.
Wow.
A painter and an artist brother, my twin brother in Phoenix, and two businessmen. My little brothers both are in building maintenance and cleaning biz in Chicago and Atlanta.
Wow.
Yeah, we cover the North America pretty well.
Yeah. So you mentioned having to move a little bit growing up. Any other hardships in your
You know, I didn't really ever think my life was too bad. The moving after your junior year of high school was pretty bad.
but it led to a really good thing.
My only other partner besides my son, Keith Dozier, also had to go through that. His dad was an Army brat, I believe, or Keith was, but it was a military family, and he moved. I've met a lot of people who've actually had to go through that, and you know, it makes you stronger, Jack.
Yeah, you survived it, and it led to a really good thing.
Yeah, you learn how to get along with people.
Yeah.
Sort of.
So, what values did your parents instill in you and your brothers growing up that you've passed on to Joe?
That's a good question. You know, pretty much 10 Commandments type of thing. I'm not a religious person. I was raised a Catholic, and you know, be good to others, treat them like you wish to be treated, and that kind of thing. My dad was a collector of people, and there were always people around the house that really looked up to him. He got people jobs, he helped them out, and you know, he ended up running a company that was educational. They put on conventions around the world. So he'd have his couple hundred friends. Where do you want to go next year? Well, let's go to Sardinia. And it might take them 2 years to get there, but they would do it, you know. So I guess my main takeaway is people are good. They need help. They need other people, and treat them right. And it'll go a long way.
Yeah, the golden rule.
And my mom was totally in on that, you know. But as you know, she raised 5 kids before she went back to teaching, and my dad had quite the career, and he truly did have, you know, everyone was his friend. until they proved otherwise. I kind of follow that.
Yeah, that's a good way to be. So you went to University of Chicago,
University of Illinois.
Illinois,
Yeah,
and how was that?
that was fabulous. Because as you remember, I was a sad 17-year-old senior in high school, didn't know anybody, and all of a sudden I was a happy freshman in college with 30,000 people to meet. And I was completely okay by the time I hit Champaign, Illinois. And it was a great school to go to. It's a Big Ten school with a lot of history and a lot of great professors. And I had a good collegiate place to grow and to learn and to have fun. And
Oh, what did you major in?
political theory and history.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What did you think you would do with that?
Well, ever since I was 13, I wanted to be a lawyer, and I never really wavered. But for a minute, I considered psychology. I thought you could help out kids by being a child psychologist. And the more psychology classes I took, the more I looked around me and thought I didn't really want to be hanging out with all these people. It was just not my thing. There was a big clinical psychology department in Illinois, which is, kind of world class, and that wasn't me. I just learned that wasn't me. So I took all the English and social studies, history, politics, political theory classes I could. And being a personal injury lawyer is odd because I dodged every hard science I could. Took zoology, botany, geology, those kinds of things. Now I know anatomy and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, well, it's amazing what you can learn when you need to,
Right.
and what you'll avoid learning when you don't need it. So you knew at the age of 13 that you wanted to be a lawyer. How did you know that?
Well, one of my dad's many friends was a lawyer, and he and his brother had a firm in Providence. And Mark Mandel, who you probably have heard of,
Oh, sure.
it turns out was mentored by these guys, Bill and Dick McMahon, and they had fourth row box seats in Fenway Park on the first base side. And we went to a lot of games, and I thought they were cool. And really appreciated them taking us or giving us their tickets. But Dick McMahon gave me Louis Niser's book, which I'm not remembering right now, and it was about 4 different trials, and one of them was the Scopes monkey trial,
Oh, yeah.
and I read that, and he gave me more books to read, and it just seemed like a cool thing to do. You could really help people out, and it was interesting. So as a young kid, 13, the Vietnam War was going on. There were assassinations of Kennedys and King, and all that stuff was up in the air. And I just thought I could make a difference if I became a lawyer. Now, my parents claim that Melissa got me through law school, and they forget that I wanted to do that since I was before I shaved, maybe. But
So how did you decide on Gonzaga and move all the way out west?
That's funny because I had not wanted to live in the Midwest, and I lived in the East. I wanted to go west. Melissa and I took a road trip to find her a job as a television producer and me a law school. And we started thinking that we would check out University of Wyoming and Casper. And when we got to the exit, we just gunned it and kept going. Couldn't talk my way into even an interview with the dean at Missoula, because back then, if you graduated from Montana's law school, you were a lawyer. Boom. No bar exam, no nothing.
Wow.
They had a lot of demand for their school. The next place I went was Spokane, and I met a guy who was the contracts professor who said that, he said, this is your first lesson in contracts. Oral promises are binding. And if you're telling me the truth about your grades and your test scores, you're in. I said, it's the truth. He goes, you're in. And then I had to apply, and he called me up. He goes, yeah, you're in. So that was the end of my search.
Wow.
We went directly to Portland and hung out with some Illini brethren here. And Melissa got a call from her mom saying, you got a job in Missoula, get home and go to work. That was the end of our big vacation, but that's how I got to Spokane.
Wow. Oh, wow. So she had a job in Missoula, and you were going to Gonzaga over in Spokane, and
I had a year to go. So I went back to Colorado and then back to Illinois, and she ended up back in Illinois too. And then we went out to Gonzaga together.
okay. Cool. So when did you come out of law school? What year?
81, May of 81.
And then what was your first job right after law school?
Oh, I dinked around for a while, and I was at Call in Multnomah County. You used to be able to get 4 criminal cases. Just show up with your bar card, and they'll give you 4 misdemeanors, and as dangerous as that was the way it worked. And I was at Call, and somebody said, this guy, Jan Wires, is looking for an associate. So I scooted over to his office and made myself irritating to the point at which he finally hired me, and there you go. And he was a trial lawyer and a judge, and that's how I met all the Posey firm and ended up working there. And
So what year did you go to Posey Wilson Atchison, big plaintiffs firm in Portland, Oregon, very famous?
1987.
Okay.
I actually started on April Fool's Day, and I left on April Fool's Day of 1991.
Wow.
It doesn't have any relation to the whole thing. It's just true.
That's an odd but interesting fact.
Right.
So yeah, 87. That's where I first met you. Was over rolling around the halls of the Posey Wilson law firm. Man, that was some going concern back there in the day.
I think we had 20
in that office. That was amazing.
Yeah.
You guys were.
And workers' comp and Social Security and any kind of.
Man, Longshore and then every other type of case. And what a pool of talent. I mean, the lawyers that came out of Posey and sort of dispersed around the area have had many of them amazing careers. So that's a tremendous firm. So when did you discover this niche of construction cases and adapted or came up with the unique approach and skills that you've got to dealing with it?
Before I went to Posey, I was renting an office with Larry Wolbrock. And Larry's a great trial lawyer, he's retired now.
Yes.
Mal specialist. And he had a case, and I argued it in the Court of Appeals and lost it. And that case gets cited all the time.
Really? Now, was that your first case?
That was the first time I did a work injury third-party case, yeah. And the name of the kid was Stephen Dingell. He got hit by a pile of drywall that had leaned up against a window while he was at lunch, and he was insulating the window. And the case stands still for the proposition that a delivery person is not subject to the employer liability law. So I had a little bit of experience with that going in and into the Posey firm, and then more cases came, and I like working for the working man and women. There aren't as many women in construction as there probably should be. A whole lot more now than there used to be.
Yes.
Working for quote unquote blue collar people who lay themselves on the line every day, when they're hurt, they need help. And it's really rewarding to be able to help them get their lives back.
Yes, yes, I agree. It's it's what makes this such an amazing and rewarding profession. Uh, I'm not a lawyer. I don't try cases. I was on that path. Certain things kind of interrupted the path, and I never made it to law school. But when I found out about this niche that I work in, which is working with trial lawyers on these cases to help financially plan these settlements in a way that means that your clients have got a clear vision of how to get to the end of their lives without running out of money. Um, and of course, we get called in pretty close to the end when money is appearing through a settlement or a verdict, and it's we get to help make it as good as it can possibly be going forward. So I share that same sentiment. It's a very rewarding business, and it it's interesting to me to have dinner with family or friends, and some of the cases I can talk about because they're in the papers, and some are against government entities which have no right to confidentiality.
Right.
Other times I can maybe share tidbits of cases, but it's nice to be able to tell stories at the dinner table where we've helped people and we've made a really terrible initial situation as good as it can be. And it makes me wonder about what are the stories that claim adjusters and defense attorneys tell at the dinner table, because I feel bad for them. I mean, how do they tell a story about, hey kids, today I was at a mediation and came up with a novel idea and chiseled this poor paraplegic settlement down by about $2 million. It's a great day. I mean, I'm probably going overboard with my explanation, but it's hard. I thought about that. I thought, well, what stories do those people tell their kids and their family?
That's a great point. I have always wondered about that. And the polite spin on it is that these people who end up as defense lawyers or business lawyers, they're generally they're risk adverse more than I am, or
Yes.
most plaintiffs lawyers. And I just like to put it as, when I wake up in the morning and I know I'm going to be helping people, I'm pretty happy about that. And I worry about these other people. What motivates them besides money? I know they are working for other people, and there's plenty of great claims representatives who are very nice people and they can have good relationships, but at the end of the day, what are they doing that's moving the needle? So
Yeah.
I do feel a bit sorry for them. Plus they're slaves to schedules and billing, and it's not my.
And notes, constant notes and communications, I'm sure they have to write to their clients. Well, it's always a happy day when we hear of a defense counsel that switches sides. I mean, I know sometimes in the trial bar, some have sort of looked at those people askance, let's say, like Trojan horses that are coming in to invade the plaintiff side. But that's not the way I looked at it. I look at it as attorneys who sort of came to an epiphany and said, boy, I really don't fit over here. I fit over on the other side, helping people fight against big corporations and
You're right.
big corporate black hats.
The people you're talking about, I've actually interviewed a bunch of them just for my own, interest. And they all say a similar thing. It's kind of like an onion that's being peeled, and finally they're back to their old self again after a while.
Wow.
They just sort of open up and feel better on helping side of life, you know.
Well, it's an interesting situation, because from my vantage point over these 32 years, it's that the trial lawyer representing the plaintiff is many times vastly outmanned, going up against corporations with seemingly unlimited budgets compared to what the trial lawyers got to put into a case. I mean, these defense costs in some of these cases must just be astronomical, when they throw as many attorneys and experts and all the power of that corporation to try to stop a trial lawyer like you from obtaining financial justice for a many times catastrophically injured individual. And, sometimes I've heard it, sort of described as Don Quixote-ish, where you're tilting at the windmills and they're the big corporate windmills, but you're jousting them and you're winning. And, that's very admirable, but you don't win all the time. I mean,
That is true.
have you, like a lot of people, have you ever lost a case? I mean, you talked about that appellate case, the first one. It sounds like they ruled against you.
Oh, that was a technical ruling. We settled that case for a lot of money. Sure, I've lost cases. I am proud to be able to prove that I'll spend a lot of money to not take a shitty offer. Excuse my
Well,
and be wrong about it.
as I said at the beginning, it's not, I think that consumers, potential plaintiffs that have been injured that are shopping for a trial lawyer, I think that they might be susceptible to a website that advertises that we settle all of our cases and we settle them fast to get you money when you need it, which from my vantage point is exactly the opposite of what injury victims should be looking for. A firm that advertises that they settle everything is telegraphing that they don't try anything, or they haven't tried anything in a long, long time. And when I've talked to some of those attorneys, Steve, and I've asked them, why? And I've had the same answer from probably a dozen who have told me that the first loss that they suffered changed them. And they didn't want to go through that experience, that deep, deep emotion of losing and feeling bad. They didn't want to go through it again. And they felt it was better just to settle and get people money and not risk that big giant zero and a client that left the courtroom with nothing. So unfortunately that happens. I mean, we've all seen it. And we talk to our clients about it. Juries, you can run into a jury that for some reason just doesn't like you or your case or your client. That happens. It's one of the risks of going to trial. What's that?
Or anybody else.
Yeah, or anybody else. So, describe, I mean, was there could you say that you've had in one case in particular that was your worst defeat? I'm going to ask you about your greatest successes too, so don't worry about that. But, and what happened there? It really just hit deep on you, because you obviously went through the same situation, but you came out of it and said, I'm going to get back on the horse and do it again.
Well, I think that playing sports, even though I was not a superstar or anywhere close, but learning to be competitive and getting knocked down and get back up and, maybe toss an elbow instead of getting hit by one, or trading elbows. And I don't mean literally, but being able to compete is a huge thing. And going back to the 4 misdemeanor cases, when you're trying misdemeanor cases or you're a public defender, you're losing a lot. But you're gaining a lot too. You get on your feet. I probably tried, I don't know, half dozen driving under the influence cases and another bunch of varied misdemeanors before I found my civil practice. And that's a fabulous background to come from if you're going to be a trial lawyer. And that's where Joe he probably tried 25 cases before he came to work with me. But so you never really learn to lose, but losing when you tried, and I tell my clients this all the time, if this is not the right thing to do, take the money, it's not enough. Even if we lose, you can always say, hey, I stuck up for myself, right? And you can't make a client go to trial, but most people will do it if they're not being treated right. And I think sometimes the lawyers talk them out of it when they shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that. And I've seen clients that told me later they regretted it because they felt like they hadn't stood up for themselves or their dead relative, husband, child, and that they really felt like they needed the story to be told and the behavior of the defendants to be exposed.
I really do not remember any client who lost their case, and there's not, more than a handful that come to mind. Nobody was mad about it. They knew they were in a battle and they gave it all they had, and that's the way it turned out.
Yeah. So what case has been the pinnacle, if you will, of your career?
Sometimes it's not the biggest case.
Yeah.
Some of the most fun is to get just a little bit of money for somebody who was told to go screw themselves 10 times before they found you, and then just get them $10,000 at the end. And we still do that for the fun of it. We, of course, had a lot of big cases, but there are certain kinds of cases in Oregon, 20080 cases, you demand $10,000, and then if they don't pay you and you beat them, you have to pay your attorney's fees. That's the most fun thing ever, because you can almost guarantee that it's going to happen. On the upside, the case that you and I worked on, and Joe last year, for the quadriplegic 21-year-old boy over in Bend, bad faith case, got him 48 times what they should have just paid without blinking an eye, and they didn't.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Are you able to talk about any of some of the legal details that led to that? We don't have to name names or anything, but that was a very interesting case with some interesting facts, and especially how you turned it into, you created a tremendous amount of bad faith potential, and then you collected on it. So.
Right. Well, it's a basic fail to pay limits case, putting their insured in a bad faith situation. And
this was a car accident. Can we say it's a car accident?
In one car accident, our guy was the designated driver who was not permitted by the drunk owner of the car to do that at the end of the evening.
Right.
But his insurer did not pay the $100,000 that they.
So, but can we talk about, because I think it was in some of the details of this accident were in the newspapers, as I recall, over in Central Oregon.
The beginning of it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So friends are heading out for a night party. It's agreed upon before they head out that your client is going to be the designated driver. And then when it comes time to leave and go home, the owner of the car, one of the group here, young men, decides that no, he's in good enough shape, he's going to drive. And then he proceeds to
flip the car,
drive at excessive speeds. He flips the car, and your client ends up with a incomplete quadriplegic, C6, I think.
Right.
If I recall. So those were the facts of the case. And then you were going after the driver as the responsible party and his insurance. And then walk us through what happened there that led to the recovery of these extra contractual damages or potential bad
The
faith.
simplest way to explain it is that if everything played out and we got a big verdict against the defendant, he'd have a claim against his company that he could have sued them, and because they didn't protect him and subjected him to all this stress of not being able to pay, and you could have saved me from this and you didn't. That didn't play out that way, but the potential was always there. And not to get too wonky, but in that insurance policy, there was an anti-assignment clause, meaning that theoretically, the defendant could not assign his bad faith case to us. Then there's a Supreme Court case called Georgetown Realty, in which there's a certain approved method of getting around that, so to speak. And so we just did everything there you can possibly do, to the point where they paid millions and millions of dollars for this kid, and they could have got out for $100,000.
Yeah, it's an amazing result.
And he's doing well.
Yeah, he's doing very well.
Yeah.
And amazing result. A very deserving young man. One of our favorites. So,
I have to say that Joe did most of the legal work on that and understands the inner workings of what I describe better than I, but that's what partners are for.
yeah, well, it's great that you've got, that your son has joined the firm. I know a lot of attorneys have kids that have got law degrees, and I think there's been sort of an unspoken rule that a lawyer's kid goes to work for somebody else first, somewhere, to learn the business, to get his chops, to let somebody else maybe chew his tail a few times.
It's a good idea.
So was Joe just at the public defender's office for a while before he joined you, or did he work anywhere else?
But I'd also say that he and a lot of kids that are, well, they're in their 30s now, but the Classroom Law Project, which is across the country, but has mock trial competitions and constitutional law competitions. It was a really big thing in Joe's life.
So, that's all right. Don't worry about that.
And what I knew when I got out of law school was probably less than what he knew when he got out of high school, having done 4 years of both mock trial and constitutional law.
Wow.
And yeah, I can't say enough about that. It's a great nonprofit here in Oregon. It's they almost half the time win the national competitions in DC, either Grant or Lincoln or Westland or somebody,
Yeah. That's a pretty cool thing to be able to brag about. We've had a lot of winners out of this state. I don't know what the program was called when I was in high school.
Civics.
Well, I mean, we had civics, but we also had, we had a couple of situations that exposed me to politics and law. And I'm trying to remember the names of them. They were right here in Oregon. I grew up in Southern California and then in the East Bay. And I told this story before. My dad was an air traffic controller in the Navy at Miramar Air Base in San Diego, which later became Top Gun. And so we lived in San Diego for 4 years when I was very little. And then when he got out of the Navy, we were briefly in Portland, where all of his family had congregated in the interim. And I went to kindergarten out in Lentz. And then he got an offer from the FAA in 1960 that if he could pass the test at University of Oklahoma, air traffic control test, that they would hire him. And he passed it, went through more training, and then first assignment was Fremont, California Regional Radar Center in down between Hayward and San Jose on the 880. So he was only in the radar center for a year and a half, and then went to Oakland, San Francisco Tracon. And then in 1968, when the Bay Area was just like it was just the crossroads of the entire world. Everything was happening. We had Haight-Ashbury in full bloom. In our town, the Hells Angels were very visible, renting houses in neighborhoods right around us. Up in Oakland, we had the Black Panther Party had started up, and things got really sort of touchy up there. San Francisco was crazy. The Zodiac Killer, I think, had just emerged, and Berkeley was in flames. I remember one night, my dad came home from work. We were having dinner, and he announced that there was a job opening at Portland, and he was being told that if he bid on it, he was going to get it, and it was going to happen fast, like in 2 weeks' time. So we moved up here in October of '68, and I moved right after the start of 8th grade, and went to 8th grade out in Pleasant Valley, and then high school Centennial. But when we got there, what I remember, there's a lot of things I remember about high school, but a couple of them was, I think we had an organization called Mock State or something like that, where you basically got involved, and it all culminated with a big trip down to Memorial Coliseum, and there was this nominating convention. You really got to kind of go through the process and see how all that happens. And I remember I didn't like the political scene. I didn't appreciate. I was a very black and white person, and I didn't appreciate the compromising that went into the sausage making to get things done. I know that's the way it's got to be, but I didn't like it. But when we had some mock trials that we practiced in a couple of classes, that got me excited. So that's my first exposure. And then on career day, I interviewed an attorney out in Gresham, Oregon, and talked to him about his practice. And he did both misdemeanors, traffic offenses, and personal injury. And nice guy, and he gave me some good counsel, and that's really how I decided I wanted to get involved in it. But it was that experience of having a little bit of exposure and thinking, wow, this would really be an interesting career. Early on, I thought that I'd actually want to be a tax attorney. Now I don't. I told people, hey, I'm gonna, when I left the investment advisory I was with, from 79 to most of all the way through 85 and into early 86, I told people, hey, I'd wanted to be an attorney, and I found a niche where I was gonna be working with trial attorneys. And only after I got into it did I realize, wow, now this would have been a great fun time.
Yeah, but if you're a tax attorney, you're fighting the man like nobody's business.
Yeah, but boy, doing what you guys do. I tried, I defended myself in a couple of speeding tickets, one in Troutdale, east of Portland, and one in Lake Oswego. And then I had an appeal to the Clackamas County Court. I was having some fun, but I really learned how stressful it can be to be in a trial and have the judge looking at you and waiting for your next question and overruling you. It was quite the eye opener, but I really enjoyed it. I can see why trial lawyers get almost addicted to trying cases. It's just living on the edge and having to react like that. It's a rare experience where you get to do it that often, and it's a great skill.
It really is invigorating. You're on the tips of your toes, and it's all coming at you, and you're thinking on your feet and doing the best you can. And it's like taking a 3-2 inside fastball and trying to do something with it. If you don't, it's over.
Yeah.
I think that my batting average is better in the law than it ever was in baseball. I know that.
Yeah, good. So, growing up and all the way through to now, if you had to pick one individual, living or not, related or not, that has had the biggest influence on you, who would that be?
Boy, there's a good one. I guess Stevie Wonder doesn't count, huh? He's my
Well,
main man.
actually, you could count. I mean, what about Stevie Wonder has been a big influence?
Well, I really like a lot of musicians, and I could answer it this anyway, but if you look at somebody like John Coltrane and where he came from and what he ended up doing, though life is short sometimes, those people are way over their skis all the time. Artists, you gotta love them. And, I got a brother who's a painter and one who's a musician, and they're taking more risks than I do. But I don't know, one person, hard to say. My wife,
Yeah.
put up with me for 44 years, and she loves me still.
Oh man, we luck out in those regards. Definitely. Yesterday, we celebrated our 36th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Kathleen and I. So yeah, it's, she jokingly said 33 of them have been happy.
Which ones?
Anyway, well, Stevie Wonder is, another one of those guys, immensely creative and had to overcome so much that many of us don't have to with his physical challenges. So, yeah, it's when we look at what we do and then we look at creatives and
Right.
what they do. I mean, I know it sounds like you too. You look at your brothers or artists or musicians and you just think, man, now that's somebody who has really had some talent and then developed it way, way, way out there, and then has created some amazing stuff.
Sure, but everybody's an artist or has the potential to be one in their own way. And it was interesting because my wife's a producer, television video producer, and along the way, I realized that putting on a trial is like producing a show. It's got to be pre-planned. It has to be thoughtful, organized, succinct, tell a story. And it was interesting halfway through our marriage to start doing settlement videos together. And settlement videos have a limited purpose. In some cases should be settled, but, and they shouldn't keep you from going to trial. But really what a settlement video does is shows somebody at a desk how a case leads to life like it would at trial, and it's no longer a pile of papers and numbers. So I don't know, there's art in what we do. There's certainly art in what you do. You've got people all over the country that you're balancing around and trying to fit whatever niche needs to be, it's creative. So we shouldn't denigrate our artisticness.
Good point. Good point. Yeah. I think I can agree with that. After a certain period of time, maybe, maybe it fits with Malcolm Gladwell's comments in one of his books about subject matter mastery, subject matter expertise.
10,000 hours.
Yeah, that 10,000 hours.
Like the Beatles got good because they played in Hamburg 4 shows a night for years.
Yeah. I mean, they got there in a hurry, and then look at what happened after that and the ways that they changed and how every album was so different but so spectacular. That's a really good example. But
Yeah.
I think we definitely have gotten to points in our careers where you've suddenly realized that you can almost relax and take things as they're coming, and from a position of sort of alert detachment that allows you to size the situation up, triage the issues, come up with a plan, and start executing the plan, and yet you can turn around and go, do some other activity without it being on your mind so much as when we were younger and consumed with this stuff, and we had to think about it constantly, right? But
experience helps a lot.
yeah, it does. It definitely does. Experience is it's huge. It's absolutely huge. So, what are the? Are you a reader?
I am.
What are you reading now?
I'm actually reading a book called Pelosi by Molly Ball. And your comment about sausage making and compromising in politics is so apt, because it's just not what trial lawyers do. Yeah, we settle cases and we negotiate, but we advocate, and we can say, oh yeah, screw you, I'm going to trial, and I always appreciate politicians because I'm not that guy, and Nancy is that person, and fabulous life story, and I kind of know how the book ends, because it's not over yet. But
It's happening right now.
right, but yeah, in these COVID times, I've read a lot, and I kind of go between politics and fiction, because reality is a little bit too much sometimes.
Yes, it's a strange time.
It is.
I've lost count of the number of times that Kathleen, my wife, has said in the morning as we're getting our coffee and looking out the windows, is this a dream? Is all this just happening in a dream? I mean, it's really quite astounding. So very, very crazy stuff. So any other books that you've read in your life that come to mind that have been hugely impressive?
Well, I remember the title of Louis Neiser's book was My Life in Court. And I to this day, I mean, I've read it a few times. It's still a great book. Everybody who is interested in the law should go read it. That was a big book. Hey, 1984 was a big book. Only we've passed 1984 in more than chronology. It's like, woo.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's a lot of commentary currently that works in excerpts out of that book, and it's from my vantage point, I feel like that the political correctness movement has gone down a path that maybe makes it more Orwellian, if you will. I think a little bit of political correctness now in the rearview mirror is a good thing, but taken to an extreme, like a lot of extreme activities, cause a lot of damage. Also,
I would say it's a false dichotomy to start worrying about political correctness when there's so much wrong in the world and everything could be fixed. So people get a little bit out on the wings when they maybe aren't as successful at bringing others with them that way. But that's why I like what I do, because I can take one client and make things better for them. And then I can do it for another person. And by the way, being a trial lawyer, and I should say in Oregon, we have the best trial lawyer organization in the country. And you could prove it, literally. But so just on a political level, sticking up for people in the legislature and nationally, um, being a lawyer is just not about the case that you're working on at the moment. It's a bigger, um, it's a movement, you know. It's sticking up for little people who are getting screwed by abuses of power all over the place. And if you want to look for abuses of power, just start with the front page and keep reading.
Yeah.
It's all over the place.
Yeah, my reference to 1984 is my opinion that we're seeing a lot of political correctness / double speak / up is down, black is white, white is black. I mean,
Wrong is right.
Wrong is right. I mean,
Um,
and no apologies when these people are exposed for having misled us. So that's the part that I sort of referenced and
Yeah.
I've resonated with is, oh man. So yeah, it's crazy times. But you know, in this business, the people that we work with come from all different beliefs and backgrounds, religious backgrounds, political persuasions. And unlike the tone and tenor that seems to be sort of on the front pages and in the news, where we have so much contention out there, I don't feel that. I don't see that with trial lawyers. I've seen trial lawyers. I remember seeing one of our famous trial lawyers who is Jewish by heritage representing a Muslim. I just thought that was one of the most amazing things I'd ever seen. And that's really, I've seen that played out in this business over and over. There's a lot more collegiality. There's a lot more acceptance. It used to be that, and I think, maybe we're missing this as a country. People of different belief systems could get together and discuss and be enriched by hearing the other person's point of view. Doesn't mean that you were swayed or you've joined their camp, but you got something out of it by listening and understanding their position versus today's climate, which seems to be that no matter what part of the spectrum you're on, if you disagree with me, then I've got a right to punch you in the mouth, which of course, we were taught that that's not the way we do it here.
Well, I mean, you're right. And we don't ask people their political party before we sign them up.
That's right.
We actually have a case now for a very conservative person who I can't wait for the case to be over with so we can talk about what her experiences are going to mean to her in the future as a politician. But people on a person-to-person level are way different than they are when they're on the internet and they're getting politicized and all fired up by whomever. And,
boy, no kidding. No kidding.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that coming out right now too, of certain government officials who have said one thing under oath and then turned around on the internet or on TV and said something completely different. Yeah, it's an interesting position. Having in my upbringing, I was raised in a very conservative fundamentalist religion from the age of 5 till my 16th birthday. Got my driver's license and started finding ways to extricate myself.
Sounds like Catholicism to me.
Yeah, I think we've all got something like that. And also a very conservative political family. And like a lot of people, got into college and maybe it's kind of like what Churchill said, what was his quote about in your 20s, you're a liberal, but by the time you're in your 30s, you might be a conservative. I can't remember the exact quote of Churchill. I'll have to find it. But I had a phase there where I definitely had much more liberal influence from professors and teachers in school. And what it ended up for me is I found out that I fit right about exactly in the middle. And I think a lot of people do.
Is that why you were a catcher?
No, I was drawn to catching because I thought the outfield was boring.
It did.
And the catcher was involved in every play, in every game. Pitchers were only involved in every play when they pitched. So that's why I was attracted to it. And I just thought it was an immensely interesting position. And it was sure, you're the only guy facing the entire field and seeing everybody. Catching was very attractive. I liked it. I liked it a lot.
I didn't mean to take you off subject, but it is a great position.
Yeah, it's a fun position to play. And, it also, you learn just how high your pain threshold is.
Have you had a knee replacement yet?
No, and the knee that is probably the candidate. I actually tore that up playing City League football after college here in Portland. But no, it's amazing how beat up you get behind the plate, and with just pitches bouncing off the ground and hitting you in various parts, especially thumbs. My right thumb is just starting to have, a little bit of stiffness, and I think it's because it's been popped backwards from a wayward, pitch so many times. But anyway, yeah, that was a good experience. So, yeah, it's an interesting career, and I felt that with my background and upbringing, and it's enabled me to relate to a lot of different people in this business. And as you know, I mean, we meet people, like we discussed, from every position on the spectrum, all religious faiths, all political persuasions, and really none of that matters. It's the ability to communicate, empathize, and then turn around and go to war for these folks to get them the best financial outcome and to obtain financial justice for them. And it doesn't matter about all that other stuff. So hugely rewarding. So I got, before I let you go, I got 3 final questions. So these are asking you to step in, lean in, and here's the first one. What are you most appreciative of in your life right now?
Well, obviously my family that still puts up with me. Practicing with my son is something that you couldn't script. It's beautiful. So I wake up happy every day, and I am real thankful for it. And like I said, my wife still loves me. We've had our 40th anniversary recently, and if you throw in the living in sin, we're in our 44th year. So it's all good over here.
You guys have been married 44 years?
40.
40. And together 44.
Right.
That is amazing. So, if your career was condensed into one sentence when it's all over, what would that one sentence say?
If I was to sanitize it, I would say that nobody can tell me what to do except for a judge. And I could still appeal the decision. But
that's pretty good.
I do what I think is best for my clients, and I don't really care what anybody else says about that. We level the playing field for normal people against corporations and people who think they can boss people around, and I don't take it for me or for my clients.
Yeah.
That's what my career means to me.
That's a pretty good sentence. So last question, and this doesn't necessarily have to relate to trial law, but what one cause or principle do you feel so strongly about that you would stand up and literally fight for it?
I think that bullies are the worst people in the universe, and somebody needs to take them down. It happens to be absurd that the biggest bully's wife's issue is bullying. Donald Trump stands for everything that's wrong with people, and I'll let somebody else take him down, but anybody pushes my clients around, tries to bully them, they got to go through me first. That's the most important thing, and that's what wakes me up every morning.
That's cool. Well, all right, Steve Piucci.
Thank you, Jack Meligan.
You are a settlement pro. And again, the definition of that is a trial lawyer that is willing to go into the arena on behalf of his or her clients, and that arena being the courtroom. And I just want to reiterate for the audience one more time, trial lawyers who try cases are the trial lawyers you want representing you. Without the background, the history of trying cases, unfortunately, you can find yourself in a position where the defense simply does not respect your counsel, your lawyer, because they know that that individual will not show up in court to fight. And that means they're working your case with both arms tied behind their back because they're not able to swing and throw any punches. You've got to have somebody that's willing to go in the arena.
You know who agrees with you? Every claims supervisor in America.
That's right.
They pay less money to people who don't try cases.
That's right. I know
They'll
this.
admit it.
I've had over 1,400 of these cases now across the country. I've been involved directly and personally in somewhere north of 380, I think 383 mediations. So I've seen trial lawyers up close and personal in a lot of cases. And I've testified in court on behalf of injury victims. So I've seen trial lawyers in court. And of course, you know, we're particularly proud of the trial lawyers here in Oregon because of the fact that it's trial by ambush, and there's essentially no discovery, which means that your comment earlier about living on the edge and having to deal with things as they're coming at you. I mean, in other venues, attorneys know what witnesses are going to be presented and what they're going to say, but it's not the case here. And it means that the trial lawyers here are really, in my opinion, in lowly little tiny Oregon, are a cut above. And I've seen a lot of them around the country.
Yeah, we don't have expert discovery, which freaks people out, but works just fine.
Yeah, it does. It's a cool system. So I'm going to remind the audience that we will publish somewhere around this podcast on iTunes or Spotify contact information for Piucci Law, where you can get in touch with Steve Piucci and his son Joe Piucci, the tag team tandem at Piucci Law. And Steve, I want to thank you for taking the time, and thank you for being a tough fighter for the rights of injury victims all over. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jack. And back at you. You're doing a hell of a job.
Well, thank you. All right. That's it for today. This has been Jack Meligan from behind the big white blue snowball microphone. Stay tuned next time for another interesting story about a settlement pro coming to a podcast near you. See you all, everybody. Bye-bye.